They say cave diving is like being born backwards. You enter the world through darkness and emerge into light. What they don't tell you is sometimes you never make it out at all. Sometimes you end up somewhere that shouldn't exist, hunting for valves in an endless maze of chlorinated nightmares, while something with too many arms picks off your team one by one. My name is Arthur Vance, and I was the lead biospeleologist for what should have been the discovery of a lifetime. 7 of us went down into those cenotes in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. I'm the only one who came back. Well, that's not entirely accurate. I came back, but I didn't come back alone. And I sure as hell didn't come back the same. The expedition started like they always do. Too much coffee, too much excitement, and that particular brand of academic arrogance that makes you think you've seen everything the underground world has to offer. We'd been tracking satellite anomalies for months, thermal readings that suggested a massive cave system beneath the jungle floor, deeper than anything previously mapped in the region. The Mexican government fast-tracked our permits when they realized the potential for ecotourism. 7 researchers, 3 weeks, unlimited funding. It was supposed to be a career maker. My team was solid. Dr. Evelyn Kim, our medical officer and marine biologist, had been diving caves since she was 16. Rodriguez and Thompson handled equipment and geology, respectively. Martinez specialized in extremophile bacteria, while Jackson documented everything with his cameras. Williams was our safety diver, the kind of guy who could navigate a sump in 0 visibility and still crack jokes afterward. These weren't amateurs. These were people who'd explored the deepest, most dangerous underwater caves on the planet. The first day of diving, we found the entrance exactly where the thermal imaging suggested. A narrow sinkhole partially hidden by vine curtains, water so clear you could see the limestone formations 50 feet down. The local guides called it El Ojo del Inframundo, the eye of the underworld. They refused to go near it, crossing themselves and muttering about spirits that lived in deep water. We laughed it off. Scientists always laugh at local superstitions, right? Right up until those superstitions start making more sense than the data. 3 days in, we'd mapped nearly 2 miles of passage, following a main artery that descended at a steady 30-degree angle. The rock formations were unlike anything in the geological surveys, twisted, almost organic shapes that seemed to pulse in the beam of our dive lights. Martinez kept taking samples, muttering about mineral compositions that didn't match anything in his reference books. The water itself was warm, warmer than it should have been at that depth, and it carried a faint metallic taste that made your tongue tingle. On day 4, we found the chamber. It was massive, cathedral-sized, with a domed ceiling that disappeared into shadows beyond our light range. But what stopped us cold wasn't the size. It was the walls. Every surface was covered in a thick, fibrous growth that looked like some kind of fungus or mold, but unlike anything we'd catalogued. It was pale, almost translucent, and it pulsed with a faint, bioluminescent glow that cycled in slow, hypnotic rhythms. Blue-green light rippled across the growth in waves, like neural activity in a giant brain. "Jesus Christ!" Rodriguez whispered through his calm. "It's like the whole chamber is alive." Martinez was practically vibrating with excitement, already pulling out sample containers. This could be a completely new form of extremophile organism, the bioluminescence alone. "Easy there, Charles Darwin," Evelyn interrupted. "We don't know what we're dealing with. Could be toxic." But we were already making the classic mistake. We were so focused on the scientific opportunity that we ignored the basic survival instinct telling us to get the hell out. The growth covered everything: walls, ceiling, even parts of the chamber floor that weren't submerged. It looked ancient, undisturbed, like it had been developing in isolation for thousands of years. And it was beautiful, in that alien way that makes you forget how dangerous beauty can be. Williams found the opening, a narrow passage at the far end of the chamber that led to an air pocket. We surfaced in what appeared to be a small cavern, maybe 30 feet across, with a sandy floor and walls covered in the same luminescent growth. The air was breathable, but heavy, humid, with a sweet smell that reminded me of flowering vines. We pulled ourselves out of the water and set up our equipment for sample collection. That's when Martinez made the discovery that sealed our fate. He was scraping samples from the wall when his tool punctured something that looked like a nodule or seed pod. The thing burst open with a soft pop, releasing a cloud of what looked like glittering dust into the air. The particles caught the bioluminescent light, swirling in iridescent spirals that were absolutely mesmerizing. "Spores," Martinez breathed, his voice full of wonder. "It's releasing spores." The sweet smell intensified, becoming almost narcotic. I remember feeling incredibly calm, like I was floating in warm water. The spores seemed to dance in the air, creating patterns that my eyes wanted to follow. One by one, my team members stopped what they were doing to watch the light show. Evelyn was the first to sit down on the sandy floor, a peaceful smile on her face. Then Rodriguez, then Williams. The last thing I remember was thinking how beautiful it all was, how the spores looked like tiny stars, and how heavy my eyelids were getting. I laid down on the sand next to my team, still watching the swirling lights, and let the sweet-smelling darkness take me away. I woke up on wet tile. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Chlorine, heavy and chemical, like an over-treated swimming pool. The second thing was the sound. A constant, low hum of water circulation systems and the gentle lapping of waves. The third thing was the light. Harsh, fluorescent tubes casting everything in cold, blue-white glare. I wasn't in the cave anymore. I was lying on white ceramic tile, the kind you'd find in a public pool facility. But the grout lines were too perfect, too uniform. The tiles stretched away in all directions, disappearing into shadow at the edges of my vision. Above me, industrial fluorescent fixtures hummed in parallel rows, some flickering, some dark, creating pools of bright light separated by bands of relative darkness. I sat up, my dive gear still intact, but my tank reading empty. The air was warm and humid, thick with chlorine vapor that made my eyes water. Somewhere nearby, I could hear the sound of moving water, not the natural flow of an underground river, but the artificial circulation of a pool filtration system. Hello? My voice echoed strangely, as if the space was much larger than it appeared. Evelyn? Rodriguez? Anyone? No answer, but I heard something else. A splash, distant but definitely human. I got to my feet and started walking toward the sound, my dive boots squeaking on the wet tiles. That's when I got my first real look at where I was. It was like someone had taken a public swimming pool and stretched it into infinity. Rectangular pools of varying sizes were connected by narrow channels, creating a maze of water-filled corridors that extended beyond my vision in every direction. The water was perfectly clear, but tinted blue-green by the chemical treatment, and it moved constantly, as if powered by some massive circulation system I couldn't see. The pools ranged from shallow wading areas, maybe 2 feet deep, to what looked like diving wells that disappeared into dark depths. The architecture made no sense. The pools were clearly artificial, perfect right angles, machine-precise tile work, stainless steel ladders and handrails, but they seemed to go on forever. The ceiling was a grid of fluorescent fixtures separated by acoustic tiles, but in the distance it faded into darkness that could have been 20 feet high or 200. It was like being inside a building that had been designed by someone who'd never seen the outside world. I followed the sound of splashing and found Jackson first. He was sitting on the edge of a rectangular pool, his camera equipment spread around him, looking completely lost. When he saw me, the relief on his face was immediate. "Arthur, thank God! Where the hell are we? I woke up here maybe 10 minutes ago, and this place is..." He gestured helplessly at the endless rows of pools. "It's impossible. It just goes on and on." "I don't know," I said, which was becoming a familiar refrain. "Where are the others?" We found them one by one over the next hour, each in a different section of the pool complex, each as confused and disoriented as we were. Elena was discovered sitting in a shallow pool, still in her dive gear, staring at water that shouldn't exist. Rodriguez was trying to find an exit along what appeared to be the outer wall, though the wall simply curved away into more pools and corridors. Martinez was collecting water samples because that's what Martinez did when faced with the impossible. Williams was attempting to map the area, though his sketches quickly devolved into frustrated scribbles. We regrouped at what seemed to be a central area, a large circular pool surrounded by a raised tile platform. The water here was deeper, maybe 8 feet, and perfectly still despite the constant circulation sounds elsewhere. It was Thompson who found the note. It was laminated, waterproof, stuck to the side of a stainless steel ladder with some kind of industrial adhesive. The handwriting was neat, precise, written in waterproof ink. Welcome to the Poolrooms. You have been selected for evaluation. To unlock the exit, you must locate and activate 5 valve stations positioned throughout the facility. The valves are marked with red handles and must be turned counterclockwise until they stop. Only when all 5 are activated will the exit door open. Warning, you are not alone in this facility. Stay together. Move quickly. Do not enter the deeper pools after dark. Good luck. The note wasn't signed, but there was something else written at the bottom, smaller text that was harder to read. Previous group count, 23. Current survivors, 0. What the hell is this? Rodriguez demanded, though his voice had dropped to almost a whisper. Some kind of sick game? Who would do this? Evelyn was examining the note more closely. The paper's dry, but this adhesive, it looks fresh, like it was placed recently. Recently for who? Williams asked. We don't even know how we got here. That's when we heard it for the first time. A splash from somewhere in the deeper pools, followed by what sounded like something large moving through water. Not swimming exactly, but something with mass displacing liquid as it moved. We all froze, listening, but the sound didn't repeat. We stick together, I decided. We find these valves, we get out of here. Jackson, document everything. Evelyn, keep monitoring everyone for signs of, I don't know, chemical exposure, hallucinogenic effects, whatever might explain this. Everyone else, eyes open, and nobody goes anywhere alone. We started searching systematically, moving through the pool complex in formation. The place was larger than it had any right to be. We walked for what felt like hours, past identical rectangular pools, through corridors lined with lockers that contained nothing but chlorine tablets and pool maintenance equipment. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead in random patterns, creating a strobing effect that made it hard to judge distance or movement. The first valve was easy to find, a red wheel handle mounted on a wall next to what looked like a filtration intake. Rodriguez turned it counterclockwise, and we heard a distinct mechanical sound from somewhere in the facility, like heavy machinery starting up. 1 down, 4 to go. The second valve took longer to locate. We had to navigate through a section of the facility where the pools were arranged in concentric circles, like some kind of bizarre mandala. The water here was deeper, darker, and the chlorine smell was stronger. Martinez kept taking readings with his instruments, but the numbers didn't make sense. The water temperature was consistent throughout the facility, exactly 82 degrees Fahrenheit, despite the fact that some pools appeared to be heated by underwater lighting, while others showed no heat source at all. We found the second valve in what appeared to be a maintenance area, tucked behind a bank of pool pumps that hummed with electric life. Thompson activated it, and again we heard the mechanical response from deep within the facility. But we also heard something else. A sound like something large moving through water, closer this time, from the direction we'd just come. "Did you hear that?" Evelyn whispered. We all heard it. A rhythmic splashing, like something with multiple limbs moving through one of the pools. But when we looked back, we saw nothing but empty water reflecting the fluorescent lights. The third valve was in the worst location yet. At the bottom of what the facility map, which we'd found posted near a bank of broken vending machines, labeled as Pool Complex C, in a section where the water was deep enough that the bottom disappeared into darkness. The valve was mounted on a submerged wall about 6 feet down, accessible only by diving. "I'll get it," Williams volunteered. 30 seconds, in and out." He entered the water carefully, using one of the stainless steel ladders. The pool was maybe 12 feet across, perfectly round, with underwater lighting that cast wavering patterns on the tiled walls. Williams took a breath and dove, his form disappearing into the blue-green depths. He was down for maybe 20 seconds when the water erupted. Something massive broke the surface. Not Williams, but something else. Something with pale, rubbery flesh and too many arms. The thing, the starfish, moved like its namesake, but was the size of a small car, with 5 thick appendages that ended in what looked like human hands. But wrong. Too many fingers, joints that bent in impossible directions. The thing's central body was a mass of translucent tissue that pulsed with its own internal light. And where its face should have been was a circular mouth lined with rows of needle-sharp teeth. Williams screamed as the creature wrapped 3 of its arms around him, lifting him out of the water. His scream cut off abruptly as one of those impossible hands clamped over his mouth and nose. We could hear his muffled struggles, see him kicking frantically as the thing began to pull him back toward the deep water. "Oh God, oh God," Jackson was repeating, his camera abandoned, backing away from the pool's edge. Rodriguez grabbed a pool cleaning net, a pathetic weapon, but it was all we had. He swung it at the creature, but the net passed right through one of its arms like it was made of thick liquid. The thing didn't even seem to notice. It was focused entirely on Williams, and as we watched in horror, it began to methodically break his bones. We could hear the snaps, sharp and wet, as it twisted his arms and legs into positions that human joints weren't meant to go. William's struggles grew weaker, then stopped entirely. The creature held his limp form for a moment, almost contemplatively, then dove back into the depths, taking our friend with it. The water closed over them with barely a ripple,
as if nothing had happened at all. We stood there in stunned silence, staring at the now calm surface of Pool Complex C. The underwater lights continued their gentle cycling, casting peaceful patterns on the walls, as if they hadn't just illuminated a murder. "What the fuck was that thing?" Rodriguez's voice was barely a whisper. "We need to go," Evelyn said, her medical training kicking in despite the shock. "We need to find those valves and get out of here, now." But as we turned to leave, we heard it again. That rhythmic splashing coming from multiple directions now. The creature wasn't alone, and it was hunting. We ran, not in any organized fashion, just pure panic flight through the endless corridors of pools and tile. Behind us, the sounds grew louder, multiple creatures moving through the water, their massive forms creating waves that lapped against the pool edges with wet, hungry sounds. The fluorescent lights flickered more rapidly now, creating a strobing nightmare that turned every shadow into a potential threat. Jackson was the next to go. He'd fallen behind, weighed down by his camera equipment, when we heard him scream. We turned to see one of those things rising from a pool that had been empty just moments before. This one was smaller than the creature that had taken Williams, but faster, its pale flesh rippling as it launched itself across the tiles with impossible speed. Jackson tried to run, but the thing's arms stretched like rubber, wrapping around his legs and dragging him backward toward the water. "Help me!" he screamed, his fingers clawing at the wet tiles for purchase. "Please, help me!" Rodriguez tried to reach him, but Evelyn grabbed his arm, stopping him. "It's too late," she said, and she was right. The creature had already pulled Jackson into the pool, and we could see the water turning red.
The thrashing stopped after maybe 10 seconds, and then there was only silence. We kept running, but the facility seemed to be changing around us. Corridors that had been straight now curved in impossible directions. Pools that had been shallow were now deep enough that we couldn't see the bottom. The fluorescent lights overhead began to fail in sequence, leaving us in increasingly dim passages where anything could be hiding in the shadows. Martinez was next. We'd found the fourth valve in what appeared to be a dead-end corridor, and he'd volunteered to activate it while the rest of us watched for threats. But as he reached for the red handle, the tiles beneath his feet gave way, not breaking, but becoming fluid, like the ceramic had turned to quicksand. He dropped into what had been solid floor, and we could see the pale flesh of one of those creatures beneath, waiting. Martinez's scream was brief but horrible, cut short by the wet sound of tearing. Rodriguez lost it then. "This is insane!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the facility. "We're all going to die in this fucking place! There's no way out! There's no fucking way out!" One of them heard him.
It came from behind, rising from a pool we'd thought was empty. This one was larger than the others, its pale body marked with patterns that looked almost like scars or tattoos. Circular symbols that pulsed with the same bioluminescent light we'd seen in the cave. It moved with deliberate purpose, not the frenzied hunting behavior of the others. This one was intelligent. Rodriguez ran, but there was no way to go. The corridor ended at a maintenance door that was locked, and the creature was between us and the way back. It cornered him against the door, and we could hear Rodriguez pleading, bargaining, offering information about the outside world if the thing would just let him live. The creature tilted its central mass toward him, almost as if it was listening. Then it reached out with one of those impossible hands and gently touched Rodriguez's face. For a moment, we thought maybe it would spare him. Then it began to squeeze. Rodriguez's skull cracked like an egg, and the creature dropped his body into the nearest pool with casual indifference. It turned toward us then, and I could swear it was evaluating us, deciding which one to take next. That's when Evelyn found the fifth valve. It was mounted on the wall next to the locked door, hidden behind a panel that had looked like decorative tilework. She turned the red handle with desperate strength, and the mechanical sounds from deep within the facility rose to a crescendo. Somewhere ahead of us, beyond the locked door, we heard the grinding of heavy metal, an exit opening. The door unlocked with a metallic click. We ran through into a narrow corridor that sloped downward, away from the pool complex. Behind us, we could hear the creatures moving, their wet sounds echoing through the facility as they pursue.
The corridor was dark, lit only by emergency lighting strips along the floor. But ahead, we could see a brighter light, rectangular, like daylight. "There!" Evelyn gasped. "The exit!" We stumbled toward the light, exhaustion and terror driving us forward. The opening ahead looked like salvation, a metal grate that led to what appeared to be natural cave wall beyond, sunlight filtering through from somewhere above. We'd made it. We'd actually made it out of that impossible place. Evelyn reached the grate first and began working at the latches that held it shut. "It's opening," she said, relief flooding her voice. "Oh God, it's actually opening!" That's when the water behind us exploded. The largest creature we'd seen yet burst from what had appeared to be a solid wall, water pouring from its massive form as it filled the corridor. This one was different from the others, older, covered in those pulsing symbols, with arms that seemed to stretch back into the darkness behind it, as if it was connected to the facility itself. It moved with terrible purpose, and its circular mouth was open, rows of teeth glistening in the emergency lighting. Evelyn had just opened the grate when the thing reached her. One of its arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her off the ground. She looked at me with desperate eyes, her hand stretched toward the opening that represented freedom. "Arthur," she whispered, "tell them
The creature tore her in half. Not clean, not quick. It held her by the waist and shoulders and simply pulled, her body coming apart with a sound like tearing paper. Her blood painted the walls of the corridor, and her organs spilled onto the floor in a steaming pile. The creature held both halves of her body for a moment, almost contemplatively, then tossed them aside and turned its attention to me. I dove through the grate. I landed hard on rough stone, rolling down a steep incline in complete darkness. Behind me, I could hear the creature trying to follow, its massive bulk too large for the opening. Metal scraped against rock as it forced itself partway through the grate, and I could feel its presence like a cold weight pressing against my back. But I kept rolling, kept falling, until the sounds faded and I was alone in natural cave passage, following a faint current of air that promised a route to the surface. I crawled for what felt like hours through narrow limestone passages, my dive light long since broken, navigating by touch and the slight movement of air that indicated direction. My hands were raw, my knees bleeding through the neoprene of my dive suit. But I kept moving. I had to keep moving. Evelyn's death kept replaying in my mind, the wet sound of her body being torn apart, the look in her eyes as she reached for freedom. Finally, after what could have been hours or days, I saw real light, not the artificial fluorescence of the pool facility, but honest sunlight filtering down through rock.
I followed it upward through a chimney-like formation and emerged into a cenote I didn't recognize, but the jungle sounds above were familiar. I was back in Mexico, back in the real world. I made it to the surface and swam to shore, my body running on pure adrenaline. The GPS on my dive computer was scrambled, showing coordinates that placed me nearly 50 miles from our original dive site. But I was alive, and I was out. The authorities found me 3 days later, dehydrated and rambling about pool creatures and underground facilities. They attributed my story to nitrogen narcosis, decompression sickness, psychological trauma from a cave diving accident. The official report stated that my team had become lost in an unexplored section of the cave system, and their bodies were never recovered despite extensive search efforts. But here's the thing they don't know, the thing that keeps me awake at night. I lied about the exit. When I came through that grate, when I fell down that rocky slope and crawled through those limestone passages, I wasn't escaping back to our original cave system. I was going deeper. The passages I crawled through weren't natural. They were carved, worked stone, with tool marks that suggested ancient construction. The air current I followed wasn't coming from the surface. It was coming from somewhere else entirely. I didn't emerge in a cenote 50 miles from our dive site. I came up through a drainage grate in the basement of an abandoned building in a part of Mexico I'd never seen before. The building was old, pre-Columbian in style, but with modern additions, like someone had been maintaining it for centuries.
and there were symbols carved into the walls, the same pulsing circular patterns I'd seen on the largest creature in the pool facility. The truth is, those spores we inhaled in the cave didn't just make us unconscious. They separated our consciousness from our bodies, projected us into that pool facility while our physical forms remained in the cave chamber. The facility wasn't a place, it was a testing ground, a filter designed to select specific types of consciousness. The creatures weren't monsters, they were executioners, eliminating the weak, the frightened, the unworthy. And I passed the test. The trauma, the survival instinct, the willingness to abandon my team to save myself, all of it was exactly what they were looking for. I wasn't rescued from the pool facility, I was graduated from it. The building I emerged from wasn't random. It was a recruitment center, a way station for people like me who had proven themselves capable of surviving in impossible circumstances. The spores gave me something, changed me in ways I'm still discovering. I can see things now, sense connections between places that shouldn't exist. I know there are other facilities out there, other testing grounds hidden in the spaces between reality. And I know that what happened in the pool rooms was just the beginning.
They're waiting for me to come back. They're waiting for me to bring others. And the worst part? Part of me wants to go. Part of me misses the clarity of that place, the pure terror that made every decision matter. In the real world, everything feels muted, distant, like I'm watching life through thick glass. But down there, in that impossible maze of pools and creatures, I was more alive than I'd ever been. The building where I emerged is still there. I've been back 3 times now, each time going a little deeper into the passages beneath. There are other levels, other facilities, other tests waiting. And there are others like me. People who've passed their own trials, who've proven themselves worthy of recruitment into something larger than human understanding. The bioluminescent patterns from the cave creatures appear in my dreams now, and I'm starting to understand what they mean. They're not random designs, they're instructions, coordinates, maps to places that exist in the spaces between spaces. The ancient civilization that built these testing grounds is still active, still recruiting, still preparing for something that requires humans who have been stripped of their humanity and rebuilt as something else. I'm writing this account not as a warning, but as an invitation. Because I know there are others out there, people who feel like they don't quite fit in the normal world, who sense that there are deeper currents running beneath the surface of reality, people who might be ready for their own test. The next expedition is already being planned. New caves, new discoveries, new opportunities for the spores to find suitable candidates. And when the time comes, I'll be there to guide them through the initial stages, to help them understand what they're truly being offered. Because the truth is, we didn't stumble into that cave system by accident. We were led there, chosen, prepared for recruitment into something that most human minds couldn't even comprehend. The thermal readings, the satellite anomalies, the government permits, it was all orchestrated, all part of a selection process that began long before we ever entered the water. My team didn't die in the pool rooms. They were eliminated because they weren't strong enough, weren't damaged enough, weren't ready to let go of their humanity and embrace something larger. But I was ready. I passed the test, survived the trials, and now I'm part of something that spans dimensions, that exists in the deep places beneath and between the world we think we know. The pool facility is still there, still operational, still waiting for the next group of candidates. And somewhere in the depths beneath it, in chambers that exist outside normal space, my former colleagues are being processed. Their consciousness integrated into the larger network of beings that serve the ancient purpose. Sometimes, in my dreams, I can hear Evelyn calling to me from the deep pools, inviting me to join her in an existence that transcends the limitations of individual human life. And someday, when I've finished my work as a recruiter, when I've guided enough candidates through their own trials, I think I'll accept that invitation. But not yet. There's still work to be done in the shallow world above, still candidates to identify and guide toward their own testing. The network is growing, expanding, preparing for something that will fundamentally change the relationship between human consciousness and the deeper realities that surround us. And if you've read this far, if something in this account resonates with you, then you might be exactly the kind of person we're looking for. The next expedition leaves in 3 months. The location is classified. But if you're truly ready, if you possess the particular combination of scientific curiosity and existential desperation that our work requires, you'll find a way to be included. The pool rooms are waiting. The ancient ones are watching. And somewhere in the spaces between reality, the next phase of human evolution is already beginning. All you have to do is take the dive.